The dovetail might be the most respectable joint in all of woodworking. A sliding dovetail locks two pieces of wood together very tightly. But how can you have a sliding dovetail that is wider on both ends? It appears that there's no possible way to slide it in from either side. Well, it is possible. This piece wiggles a little bit, so it really is a separate piece of wood, and I can prove that it's possible. There are some markers here on one end, not the other, and when no one's looking, I can take it out and put it back in the other way. The secret to this puzzle is that the joint is curved. The tenon rotates into the mortise like this. The tenon is actually not wider at either end, it's equal width all the way across. But in the middle, where it's thicker, the part that you see on the outside looks more narrow. This is a silly little project, but I've been thinking about it for a long time. I got the idea from this awesome book of wooden puzzles by Edwin Wyatt. The book provides a diagram with the implication that you're going to carve this out by hand. I can't even imagine what it would be like to accurately chisel out these compound curves. So, as an unapologetic power tool junkie, I figured there must be a way to do it with a router. I'm going to use this dovetail bit and my new favorite tool, this Bosch trim router. Somehow we need a jig that will sweep the bit in an arc like this. Somewhat arbitrarily, I picked a 6-inch radius as the curvature involved. If I were to do this again, I would go with 5 or 5.5 inches to get a more pronounced effect. This is going to be the base for the router, cut from some 1/2-inch scrap, roughed out on the bandsaw, and then sanded right to the line. Then I removed the normal router base and put this curved one on instead. This is really weird. Now we need a cradle for the router to ride on. With the same 6-inch radius, I'll cut out and sand a couple of these concave pieces. You'll actually need 3 of them. Here are the 2 halves of the cradle attached to the block that's going to be our mortise piece. The completed project is going to be 3 by 3 inches, but I started with an extra wide piece of 1-inch wood so I can screw the cradle to it. I used a couple of shims thinking I'd need to cut the dovetails a little bit at a time, but as it turns out you don't need them. You only need about 3/8 of an inch of side-to-side movement with the router. The bit I'm using is 14 degrees, 1/2 inch wide and 1/2 inch tall. I removed most of the material with several passes using a straight bit, then I chucked in the dovetail bit for a final pass. This jig works great. With the mortise complete, I'll start to work on the tenon. We'll start with a block of wood that's just slightly wider than the mortise. The tenon gets profiled with the same 6-inch radius curve. Then, on the router table, with the same dovetail bit and another concave guide, the tenon gets a profile that should match the mortise perfectly. This one's a little loose, so I'll adjust the fence on the router table and make another one that's nice and snug. I can then mark it flush with the mortise, cut it off, and sand the whole joint together. Now for some finishing touches. I'll round over the 4 corners, sand everything, apply a finish, and some paste wax to lubricate the sliding parts. On the lathe, I turned the little dots that mark one end of the mortise and the tenon so you can prove that the joint comes apart. The last step is to drill a pair of holes, here and here, so this tiny piece of a dowel can go in the hole here and lock it into place. That locks it into place, and now you can't move it. Knock the dowel back up into the tenon, and now you can slide it out.